I listened to the new album, and to me, it almost felt like it starts very happy. It felt like a little parade to me, and I was like, "Damn, this would be fun to listen to live." Did you have the same feeling, or at least wanted to make people feel this way when you made the album?
Um, all the music I was writing at the time was coming out quite upbeat and energized and jubilant, because I'd just gone through the longest period I've ever been, of not being able to write anything, to the extent that I thought perhaps my creative days were behind me or something. And it was quite a sort of scary time. So when I was able to write again, had that impetus and that urge, and everything started flowing, um, I felt over the moon. I felt relief and gratitude and excitement. And so, yeah, it just became a bit of a thrill to write that style of music, I suppose.
Okay, so it was like a little therapy session because you went into it being sad, and then you were like, "Yeah, this is fun."
Yeah, I mean, sad, like desperate, um, like confused, disorientated. Like I've written since like every week since I was like 11 years old, 10 years old. Um, so to suddenly, not be able to write music for a year and a half was, yeah, all of those emotions.
Okay, so why didn't you write in this time? Just because.
So it's just the pandemic period basically. So we stopped playing shows. And I think there are all sorts of like small reasons, but I think one of the biggest reasons that was that we weren't playing shows. And I I assume now that there is, the recipe for me to be creative includes the ingredient of live shows.
I see.
That sense of human connection, that sense of purpose, that free flow of energy, it all goes into making me want to write music. And so I guess that during that period, it was like my brain had just decided that, there was no need to be creative. And it was like, what's the point in writing music if you can't share it with people in a physical space? So yeah, it just sort of stopped. So it was very, very disorientating.
You've kind of answered this in the beginning, but was there a plan beforehand to make the album sound a certain way? Because I think it's very different to the one before, or does it just kind of happen when you come together and jam?
Yeah, it's usually pretty instinctual. And it's usually kind of surprising. I mean, when I wrote The Spark, that was like, you know, notoriously the sort of worst year of my life, but the music came out quite positive, and quite melodious. Um, and the same sort of thing happened with this album. It was a difficult time, but then it was almost like my subconscious was willing me out of that difficult time, or at least showing me that, you'll be able to enjoy these songs that you're currently writing in a few years' time when you get to play them live or whatever. So yeah, it's never really that formulated. I think after I started writing a few of the tracks, it then became, we were like looking at what we had and we were like, wow, is this going to be just like an album full of short, sharp bangers? And that's we were kind of joking at first, but then it sort of became like that. There's not much self-indulgence on this record. There's not much like 6 minute progressive, big journeys that we've thrown everything at that have all these layers. There's much more kind of there's more confidence just to say like, this is a good melody, let's let that melody shine. Whereas before we may have said, oh yeah, but then let's add this and this and this. And yeah, so it's a more kind of minimal and focused album, I think.
It's so funny that you say that with the bangers, because that's what I thought. And I was going to ask you, but I thought it was a stupid question because the word bangers is so kind of terrible. But that's what I
Yeah,
thought.
yeah, yeah.
Lots of like hits or songs that you would play at a party are very
Mm.
also, though, I think musically, there's lots going on. Like there's four genres in one song almost, which is like kind of typical, if I uh, may dare say so for you. But how does that happen? Do you like put every instrument into your studio that there is, or is this also just kind of by accident, like the happy songs?
Yeah, yeah, I think it's I'm quite lucky that I was brought up around many different styles of music. So I feel comfortable in many different styles of music, and I also feel comfortable playing many different instruments. I'm not like a virtuoso at any instrument, but I love experimenting and I love writing on different instruments, and I love the thrill of, creating something and not really knowing what you're creating. I know sort of an okay amount of music theory, but I love like just being lost in a chord sequence and not really knowing what you're doing. I find it kind of shuts the critical area of my mind up, because I can be very self-critical and, oh, this isn't good enough. Oh, this is a melody that's being used too much, or a chord sequence or a rhythm or whatever. Whereas if I'm just like lost in something new and I don't really understand fully what I'm doing, I feel a freedom, and a sense of just like, well, I don't really care if it's like technically proficient or like, is going to make people go, wow, that's really technically crazy. But it's more about an emotion. I write with my sort of, just very aware of what I'm feeling. So yeah, it's very instinctual, very emotional process.
The pandemic was quite hard for all of us, but especially people with like mental health issues. You already said it was hard for you because you couldn't be creative and stuff. How did you like deal with this time? How did you make it through?
Yeah, I basically just buried my head into writing a book. And that was, it gave me some sense of contentment, because it's still a creative thing, but it's not, most of it was actually just researching. It was nonfiction. It was basically the accompaniment book, to our previous album, Nothing Is True and Everything Is Possible. So I just buried myself in that. And obviously, and being a writer and author is a very reclusive kind of solitary process anyway. So that basically became my sole focus and purpose. And I was very thankful that I had, that to focus on, because yeah, I'd have lost my mind, if I hadn't had it.
Yeah, I bet. Because I was wondering, like, you have to put it somewhere, like the world is on fire, especially in your home country. There's like 1 million prime ministers in 3 weeks, and then there's Brexit and COVID and stuff. So it wasn't on purpose that you left that out, because usually your music is political, but this album doesn't feel as political, to me at least. But it wasn't on purpose. You just kind of shifted your energies elsewhere, and then out came this very happy album. And that was,
Well, I think it's always there. There are always those layers there. I think it's certainly musically, it doesn't sound pessimistic or that angry or that sort of depressed, because of how I said that the music was just flowing out of me like that. But yeah, there's still a lot of social commentary on there. I mean, for instance, there's a couple of the tracks look at that sense of powerlessness, and I think that's one of the most worrying things, like, about our society at the moment, the lack of power that we all have, the way that our democracies have just become kind of strange, almost like underlying dictatorships in a way, or certainly in a sense of like everyone is just involved and kind of saluting towards the neoliberal kind of capitalistic world that we live in. And it's like that is cemented as the structure that we have, and everyone just takes that for granted now, and no one kind of has any imagination to think of anything different. If you start even just starting the conversation of how could we do things differently, people just go, oh well, are you a communist or a socialist or something? Because that's the only other things that their minds can think of. It's like, well, actually, there's a lot of other ways that we can structure societies, in a more sustainable, more healthy way, for public health and for the health of our planet. And yeah, so yeah, all these like underlying layers are always there. So yeah, Goldfish, it talks a lot about power, and also that the sense of powerlessness is such a dangerous thing, because if you feel powerless, you won't act. You'll just cower and you'll shrivel, and it's just like a spiral. The more powerless you feel, whether you are actually powerless or not, the less you will act. And that's exactly the position that those in power want their subjects, their public, you know, to feel. They want them to feel powerless so they can continue the status quo and they can continue their hoarding of wealth. And then, yeah, so there's other songs. It Hurts is all about like failure and how we should reframe failure and not be so sort of scared and or not ridicule it or avoid it. What else have we got on there? Yeah, there's a lot of soul searching as well. But yeah, I find like a lot of the personal songs also come out having a political undertone as well. Like the, you know, I always think back to the Spark and how that was basically just all a personal album, but then it actually said big things about society. So you know, it was that album was all about vulnerability and how we need to accept that we're vulnerable creatures and the ways we've been brought up, especially in Victorian Britain, and how that's kind of pervaded and stretched across the world. That idea that we're not fragile, we should, you know, have the stiff upper lip, and we should be brutal, self-interested creatures. That creates a distorted sense of human nature, and it creates therefore a very hostile world, and it creates people like Donald Trump, who's been told that he cannot be vulnerable his whole life, and so then it, you know, creates monsters basically. So yeah, even the personal can be very, very enlightening in terms of politics.
This might be a stupid question, but I thought about this when I listened to the album, and it ends with this very nice outro type thing. The giant Pacific octopus swirling off into infinity is weirdly fitting to what we're hearing. It's a nice way, I thought, to end an album. Why did you do that with the fishy theme, goldfish also, and the octopus? So is there a reason to
Yeah.
it? Fun.
There was no that again. It was just like that's how those songs were all like written independently, and it just came, you know, to be almost like a theme on the album. I think basically it's because I like watching nature documentaries. Really, that's kind of it. Yeah, the giant Pacific octopus I thought was just a way. I mean, I literally say it in the first verse of I don't know you anymore. I'm a chameleon. No, that's a bit pedestrian. I just, you know, there's been so many songs that use the metaphor of being a chameleon. There's even songs called Chameleon that we all know and probably love. And so I thought, like, well, actually, I don't know a song about a giant Pacific octopus, which is also a creature that changes its color or shape, depending on its environment, basically. And so I thought, well, I'll use that instead of a more tired metaphor. And yeah, the goldfish in the bowl, I just thought that was just classic as well. It really conveys how our thought processes are limited, and how the society that we live in and the norms we have limits our thinking, and how we can get quite trapped in a goldfish bowl. And you know, we perhaps don't realize that we're not free, because everyone knows that a goldfish has a very short memory, and so we can be swimming around thinking that we're acting with clarity and compassion and in a good way, and then actually we can be going through cycles that are quite damaging, or be part of bigger structures that are destructive. So yeah, it's just the way these things turn out.
Thank you for taking the time. I can't wait to see you on tour, and now you can go back practicing. That was
awesome. Hell yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me. Cheers.
Yeah, it was nice meeting you. Have a nice day, and say hi to the others for me. Bye.
I will do.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.